And good evening, everyone. I'm Lisa Jane Morrisette, Operations and Programming Manager for KPBS Radio. Thank you so much for joining us this evening for this virtual event, the KPBS Insider. This event series is geared for those members who want to know more about KPBS's inner workings, to engage with our team and connect with other supporters who enjoy and value KPBS. Today, you're in for such a special treat, as this insider event is all about the people you've come to listen to and trust for your local news. It's a reporter's roundup featuring Kitty Alvarado, Andrew Bowen, and M.G. Perez. We'll hear more about their reporting beats, what stories they're working on, and their personal stories from behind the mic. And you'll have your opportunity to ask the questions you've been wanting to know, and we'll answer a little bit later in this hour. But before we start our program, we want everybody to get comfortable and settled in. So we have some fun polling questions inspired by the local and national reporters that you rely on each and every day as a listener and supporter of KPBS. So question number 1 should be popping up on the screen here. What is the name of the Navy corruption scandal convict covered by KPBS's Steve Walsh, who recently escaped custody? So that's our first question. What is the name of the Navy corruption scandal convict covered by Steve Walsh, who recently escaped custody? And let's see some of our answers. If they come in, I'm not going to give it away yet. I'll let some people give their answers. Okay, and let's go ahead and reveal the answer is Fat Leonard. The convict's actual name is Leonard Glenn Francis, so that answer would also be considered correct. But Fat Leonard is what we've heard all the coverage of. So I hope you got that first polling question. Next up, we have our next question for you. Governor Newsom recently signed a law to keep this nuclear power plant open until 2030. Let's see what you all had to say for an answer to this polling question. Again, we're just letting people get settled into the webinar and make sure that they're connected and comfortable. And so we have these polling questions to keep us occupied for just a little bit to make sure everybody's here with us and can participate. So again, Governor Newsom recently signed a law to keep this nuclear power plant open until 2030. And let's see what you had to say for that. The answer is Diablo Canyon. That's right. For those of you who have been keeping track of that story, congratulations if you got that right. Up next, our next question, number 3. Which newly opened San Diego venue was criticized for not having shaded seating during the current heat wave? And I actually heard this story from a person who was actually there. So which newly opened San Diego venue was criticized for not having any shaded seating during the current heat wave? I'm sure a lot of you know the answer to this if you were there at that game. If not, I'm sure a lot of you probably have a good guess. And again, we're just going to let a few people have a chance to respond. And the answer is yes, Snapdragon Stadium, SDSU Aztec Stadium. It was a hot one. And as I heard firsthand, it was pretty unbearable. So, all right, our next and last question is coming up right now. 2/3 of what group in a recent NPR PBS NewsHour poll said that they do not want Donald Trump to run for president in 2024? So 2/3 of what group in a recent NPR PBS poll said they do not want Donald Trump to run for president in 2024? Let's see. Who could that be? And our answer is independent voters. So thank you so much for playing along. Now that we've got everybody in the webinar and here with us, we want to get started and really get into today's event, this KPBS Insider event. We're here for you tonight to give you an inside look. In addition to the 3 reporters that we're going to be interviewing tonight, we're excited to introduce KPBS's newest news director, Terence Shepard. Terence joined the KPBS newsroom just last month and will oversee our news team of editors, reporters, and other journalists. He previously worked as the news director at WLRN in Palm Beach, Florida, as well as business editor at the Miami Herald. Welcome, Terence Shepard. Thanks so much for joining us here tonight.
Thank you very much, Lisa Jane. And WLRN covers all of Southeast Florida, Broward, Palm Beach, Miami-Dade, and Monroe counties.
Yes. So first question for you, what excites you so far about San Diego?
That's easy. Unquestionably, it is KPBS, because KPBS is unique in that it aims to serve its audiences on 3 platforms: audio, video, and digital, website, and social. Those are ambitious goals. The station, the people of the station are so dedicated to the craft of journalism. They are intensely interested in doing the right thing about audiences, about serving San Diego. And I can tell you on an individual level, the 3 reporters who are here with us tonight have each given me warm welcomes. Sometimes you're at a new job, there's a hazing routine, but these 3 have been really genuine and welcoming and accepting and guiding me along the right pathways in terms of this is who we are. These are our great expectations for you, Terence. And so I really appreciate the 3 individuals with us tonight.
That's great.
Besides KPBS, I find San Diego charming. You might find this surprising that the distinct neighborhoods remind me a lot of Manhattan. Just nice. You go from neighborhood to neighborhood to neighborhood. Several areas are quite urban, yet quite walkable. I enjoy that. The weather. The weather is
I was going to mention it.
There's the weather. And what I find interesting is, so on our weather, the weather segment of Evening Edition gives the 4 different climates. And that to me is fascinating: the coast, inland, mountain, and desert. That I find that just fascinating. I don't think there's another region in the country that aims to serve people in 4 different climates. So yes, it's a great town, but most importantly is KPBS.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that answer. And just out of curiosity, what sorts of stories do you see as the front burning issues here in San Diego that we're going to be looking at?
Well, front burning, interesting you should say that. I would say the environment, and I've been introduced to wildfire coverage, and it's a thing of beauty, the way the news team discusses how to cover wildfires, because you don't want to go full out on something that is of a relatively minor impact, but you do want to be prepared for, say, the big one. Mm-hmm. And so I'd say the weather, the heat, obviously the heat, and the reduction of electricity use, the request to turn off your AC and don't use your lights, that is going to be an issue we see. I'm going to pull out my crystal ball, predict we'll be seeing that more frequently in the future. Another issue is housing costs. It has to be an issue. I think my first visit here, I saw a story that said the median home price is $1 million. And that to me is just took my breath away. San Diego is a popular place to live, and people are willing to pay to live in San Diego. And so the issue will be to not price San Diego out of regular working folks' affordability. So that's going to be another issue you'll be hearing about. Que mas. I've met lots of people in the newsroom and outside. People say, San Diego is the biggest little town in America, in the US, in the world. And sometimes I get it as though it's an apology. And I just want to, if you were on here and you've said that or thought this, is that perhaps this is something you need to embrace. Because I've walked around, I find people very friendly. People will say hello in the streets. And for a city and a county with a population that San Diego has, you just don't see that. You don't see people saying, hey, to strangers. You just don't see that elsewhere. So you want to embrace that being the biggest small town around. Just give yourselves a pat on the back. Whatever's in the water, it's doing you right.
And another question for you. Do you think that the news happening right here locally in San Diego has any impact elsewhere in the world?
Well, you can say that the issues we face are issues on the cutting edge of the rest of the world. The border issues, housing affordability, issues of the unhoused, which have a tie into mental illness. So yes, I attended a meeting this week with other editors from California public media stations. And they told me in no uncertain terms, Terence, we need to hear more from KPBS because you have everything going for you. And we want you to share that with the rest of California.
Yes, let's find those unique stories and share them with the rest of not only California and San Diego, but with the rest of the world. So thank you so much. And I do have one last question for you. How are you personally coping with this heat compared to the Florida heat?
That's kind of an embarrassing question because I did not detect heat. I visited my cousin in Lake Elsinore over the weekend. It was 103, kind of early in the day, and I enjoyed my morning coffee outside in the pool on 103. And everyone else there is not accustomed to the heat, so I haven't. So when you say the heat, I say what heat? But I'm sure over time I will feel it the way San Diegans feel it.
Yeah, you'll adjust eventually. So be
I'm looking
prepared.
forward to that.
So thank you again, Terence, for joining us this evening. I know you're going to stick around for the entire event because we're going to have some more questions from the people in the audience for you. So please stay with us. And again, audience, if you do have a question for Terence or any of our reporters, please put that in the Q&A and we'll try to get to many of those questions from you again later on this hour. So, and now, speaking of our reporters, let's introduce them. Coming up first, we have Kitty Alvarado, KPBS's general assignment reporter. We want to welcome Kitty, and she should be unmuting and turning on her camera. Over there she
Hello.
is. Hi, Kitty.
Hello.
Next, we have with us Andrew Bowen, KPBS Metro reporter, and there he is. Hi, Andrew. And lastly, also with us this evening is KPBS education reporter, M.G. Perez. Hi, M.G.
Hey, everybody.
Welcome all of you. And thank you again for joining us for this KPBS Insider event for our very special members in the audience. My first assignment for each of you tonight is to please explain your beat, what you cover on that beat, and why it's important for KPBS to cover this news for our community. Kitty, I'm going to start with you first.
All right. Well, I'm the daily news reporter, and it's important for two reasons, I think. First of all, I come in, I never know what I'm going to do, but I get the daily story of the day, whatever's happening, of the story of the day. And it's important because we keep our viewers and our listeners informed. So that's really important. But secondly, it's because we have reporters that cover specific beats, and that frees up those reporters to dig a little deeper and do those stories that require a little more in-depth coverage. And I think that's what sets us apart from other stations, and that's what makes KPBS really special.
Great. Andrew, let's hear about your beat and why it's important.
Well, I'm the Metro reporter, and that means I cover local government. So a lot of coverage of the mayor, the city council, regional governments like SANDAG, the San Diego Association of Governments. And it's important just because people need to know what the government is doing on their behalf, of course. Some of the subject matters that come across my beat a lot are housing, as Terence mentioned. That's a huge issue politically in San Diego. Transportation is another big one, and that's very closely linked with climate change and our ability to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and lower our dependence on cars. Yeah, it's a rich beat. There's always a lot happening politically in San Diego, and it's oftentimes a place where ideas start and then spread to other parts of the state and the country.
Great. And finally, MG, let's hear about your beat, the education beat, and why you think it's important.
So I am the education reporter. And why it's important is because education is such an important part of everyone's life. When I took this job, I said that I wanted to think outside the box. So beyond just K through 12 classrooms and what was going on there, but other education involving adults. And I've done a feature story on cooking, learning how to cook. And I've got a couple of surprises up my sleeve that you're going to see later this fall. But that's really why I think it's important. It's because we're all hopefully being educated in some way every day of our life.
That's right. And again, we're going to have questions from our audience a little bit later, and hopefully everyone is comfortable and staying cool in this unbearable weather we've been having, which is apparently about to change. You can't avoid the weather as one of the biggest issues affecting San Diego right now. And each of you has had recent stories dealing with the heat or climate issues. For example, MG, you brought us a story just yesterday about how the schools are dealing with this excessive heat. Can you recap that story for us?
So full disclosure, I'm from Houston, the Bayou City, where we have 100-degree weather and 100% humidity. However, everything is air conditioned, and that's how you survive in Houston and in Texas. That is not the case here in California. And what that story got to the heart of was schools that didn't have air conditioning. Now, San Diego Unified, the largest district here in the county, all schools, with the exception of San Diego High School, have air conditioning. The problem is the heat has been so intense and there's been such a draw on the need for power that they broke down. And so that was really the story. Broken air conditioners, trying to get portable air conditioners up in Poway. Unified, they also had the same problem. So that was a story that wouldn't necessarily be an education story, but it certainly affected a lot of students and their parents and families, as well as teachers.
Yes, thank you. Kitty, you recently had a pretty compelling story about hundreds of animals rescued from the Border 32 fire. You seem to have a soft spot for our furry friends and a connection to first responders. Can you tell us more about why you're so passionate about these types of stories?
Well, I mean, the little animals, they're so vulnerable. I mean, that story just encompasses everything that's going on with climate change and our first responders, just all in one giant. I mean, you just looked at those animals that were suffering. People weren't home from work. They were trapped and people were fleeing. They didn't have time to get their animals. And these first responders, all of them, I should say the majority of them, don't get paid. They were risking their lives to save these animals, and they had so many close calls saving these animals, and it was so incredible to watch how close they came to getting trapped or burned themselves. And I do have a really soft spot for first responders. My husband is an assistant chief in the Long Beach Fire Department. My son is a firefighter, and my other son is a lifeguard with the fire department. So my whole family's first responders. So climate change definitely is affecting my family, and it's really scary to see. I've covered fires for so many years, and it's really scary to see how climate change has affected that coverage, to see how tremendously huge these fires grow in a matter of hours. Just the Fairview fire here in Hemet, it went from like a 9,000 square foot fire to a 19,000 square foot fire in 6 hours. The evacuations are already reaching wine country. And so it just shows you how quickly fires are growing. It's a whole different beast, covering fires and putting out fires. And so just the thought of my own son being in harm's way, and these fires are unpredictable. I heard one firefighter describe the way the fire went down the canyon in that Fairview fire and killed a father and a daughter. They never expected that fire to make a run down that canyon. It was something, the mapping and the prediction tables, it's something that never would have happened typically. And so that just goes to show you what is happening lately, and just how scary it is. I don't know, it chokes me up just thinking about it, and to think of all of these firefighters, all of these families that are in harm's way tonight, it's pretty scary.
Thank you for your coverage of that. Andrew, I've noticed your passion for covering alternative transportation, such as bicycles and e-bikes, bike lane development, and how we can address climate through alternative types of transportation. And also, many of your stories address transportation safety. Can you talk about why these stories are important to you and your beat?
Absolutely. Well, I can give you a bit of history about my career and how that impacted my interest in these issues. After I graduated college, I moved to Germany and was working for the international public broadcaster there called Deutsche Welle. And I lived there for 6 years, and for 6 years, I never once had to get behind the wheel of a car. I would take the train, I would bike, I would take the subway. On rare occasions, I might have needed a friend to drive me somewhere, or to pick something up for me. But it was truly an incredibly liberating experience, being in a place where you don't have to rely on a car. And so that really framed my perspective. I moved to San Diego from Germany. So actually today was my 7th anniversary of working at KPBS. My first day was September 8th, 2015. And so something that was happening right around that time, a few months before, the city council approved or adopted what's called a Vision Zero resolution, which is basically a statement that we want to eliminate all traffic deaths and serious injuries in our city on our city streets. And they gave themselves a deadline of 2025. About a month after I came to KPBS, the city council adopted its very landmark, groundbreaking climate action plan with very ambitious pledges to slash greenhouse gas emissions, and also to end, transportation and cars being the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in here. A big component of that was to encourage and improve the experience of people who bike and walk and take public transit. So those two things happening right around that time, and those also having very big implications on all the decisions that the city was going to be making over the next several years, have been just a continuous source of news and things to cover for me. I approach it from an angle or through a lens of accountability. So we can debate individual policies and whether they're good or bad for the city, but ultimately the city did make these promises to build a city that's more sustainable, and where people wouldn't have to rely on cars as much as they do now. On another personal note, on the subject of transportation safety, that's something that's really personal for me. My senior year in high school, a classmate of mine died in a car crash. About a year and a half, no, it wasn't a year and a half, it was about, I want to say 8 months later or so, a very close friend of mine, who was also a classmate of mine, died in a car crash with her boyfriend. And then less than a year after that, it happened a third time, a very close friend of mine from high school. And so seeing the fragility of human life at that young age, and seeing the violence that can occur on our streets because of unsafe infrastructure, because of our streets being built for speed rather than safety, really left an indelible mark on me. And it's something that has really kept me coming back to these stories about safety and also just sustainability. We can't expect people to bike in San Diego if doing so risks their lives. That's just not fair. And so, it's a subject that I cover quite a bit. I'm going to keep on covering it because, frankly, the city of San Diego is not living up to its promises in the Climate Action Plan and in that Vision Zero pledge.
This is great to see how dedicated our reporters are and how passionate they are about covering the issues that matter so much to each and every one of us. We are going to turn to some questions from the audience. First question is for Kitty. Kitty, who decides what the story of the day is? Can you approve and or move it elsewhere? And this is from Jocelyn Shannon.
That's a great question, Jocelyn. We have a morning meeting and we all kind of have our little say. Sometimes we go back and forth, and ultimately, I suppose our editors and I think Terence has the ultimate veto power, so to speak. But we all do have our say, and I love KPBS because reporters really do get their say, and our opinions do matter. And that really is empowering to work at a station where you feel like your opinion counts. And even when you're out in the field and you're covering a story that you're assigned, and you call and you say, wait a minute, I'm here, but I'm not seeing what the story was originally intended to be. This is a whole different story. They trust you because you're the eyes and ears you're there. And they say, you know what, we trust you, go for it. And so it's awesome. And we all have our say, but Andrew and MG can attest that, we have our little back and forth, but that's what it's all about, Thank you. That's a great question.
It is a very collaborative newsroom, and there is a lot of back and forth and a lot of meetings throughout the day. MG, we have a question for you as well from Jocelyn. What testing is or will be done to see the effect of the pandemic on student academic results in the coming year?
Wow, Jocelyn, you've got lots of great questions this evening. It depends on which school district you're talking about. The state has been very active in providing support for students during the pandemic. And San Diego Unified, quite frankly, has taken a leadership role in that as well. So as far as testing goes, first of all, we're not going to really know for a few years what the ultimate impact is. One thing I want to mention along these lines is people kept saying during the heat of the pandemic, I can't wait to get back to normal. Let's get back to normal. And the reality is, I don't think we're ever going back to normal. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. And so for me, it's really about what is education going to look like now? We were online for a long time. Then we were hybrid, then we were back, and we were here, we were there, we were everywhere. And now, what is it going to look like? And I think that's really the question. And I hope, Jocelyn, I don't know if you're a parent, but I hope that parents take an active voice in what that looks like, because it's their kids ultimately that are their lives and their futures are at stake.
Andrew, our next question is for you from one of the attendees in the audience. How do you feel the city is doing on its master bicycle plan? How do you approach reporting on that topic?
Yeah, another great question. Y'all are coming at us with really good, thought-provoking questions. So the city of San Diego's bicycle master plan was adopted in 2013, and it's basically a map of which streets the city wants to implement different types of bike facilities. So on this street, we'll have a painted bike lane. on that street, we're going to have signage and markings that show that cars need to share a lane with bicycles. On this street over here, we're going to have a separated bike lane with some physical protection for cyclists. And so that was adopted in 2013. It was before the Climate Action Plan, and it was before a lot of the cities, more ambitious or sort of amping up the ambition of their goals with regards to cycling in the city. So it recently, the city council just updated its climate action plan, and one of the things that they committed to do is update the bicycle master plan as well. How do I think that the city's doing at implementing the bike master plan? Not well, frankly. The city has, it all has to do really with the city having a really astounding shortage of funds for infrastructure. I can't recall exactly how they measure this every year. They look at 5 years into the future, how much money do we need in order to meet all of our infrastructure needs, and how much money do we expect to take in revenue? And the gap is what we call the infrastructure deficit. And over the next 5 years, I think it's just over $4 billion. This is not just streets and roads, it's also public facilities like libraries and police stations, water infrastructure. And so the shortage of funds means basically it locks in the status quo of whatever amount of money we spend on roads, on repaving streets. We can't divert any of that because people care really deeply about potholes and the quality of their roads. What the mayor has tried to do is, and actually this started under the previous mayor, he implements a bike facility or paints a new bike lane whenever the street is going to be resurfaced anyway. And so it's definitely a cost savings. It's efficiency because you're repaving and restriping the street anyway. So why not take a fresh look at what design makes the most sense for this street? But that's essentially become the only time that the city implements bike infrastructure, with very limited exceptions. And so basically the city is putting bike lanes based on, or they're implementing bike lanes based on where the streets are in the worst quality or condition, not where the bike lanes are most needed in order to prevent death and injury. And so that's one thing that I think a lot of people don't necessarily realize about San Diego. The mayor in his first budget did actually get funding for a new team of engineers and contractors who would go out on the streets. It was like brand new funding for a new program. So it wasn't going to be diverting funding from anywhere else. And he called it the STAT team. Basically, the goal is to speed up the implementation of bike lanes, but also crosswalks and other types of pedestrian and transportation safety treatments on the street. And I've been checking in periodically on what the status of that team is. I can't recall exactly how much money was set aside for it, but the problem that the city learned or faced is, and this is a perpetual problem also in city government, is it takes a really long time to fill positions. When I checked in, I want to say like 6 or 8 into the fiscal year when this money had been appropriated, there were out of, I don't know, 10 or 12 positions in this team, they had managed to hire 1 or 2. And so, we had these big promises of speeding up the transformation of our streets to make them safer. And it just wasn't happening when we did a reality check on it, because government moves very slowly. The city is chronically short on cash. It's really expensive to hire somebody, and it's and just the bureaucracy of city government can also be slow things down. So yeah, the implementation of the bike master plan has not been stellar. And I at risk of rambling, I'll close on this note. Just another kind of interesting tidbit. So oftentimes when the city is repaving streets, it doesn't pave an entire mile at one time. It might only be 2 blocks. So let's say you have a street where the bike master plan says we need to add a new bike lane here, but it's only repaving 2 blocks of a mile-long corridor. The city typically doesn't add bike lanes to those 2 blocks because, you'd have a bike lane and then it would end. It wouldn't make much sense. So this is where sort of the Achilles heel of the approach to bike lanes in the city is, which is that when you make decisions on where to put bike lanes based on where you're repaving streets, then a lot of times it can take a really long time for an entire corridor to have a continuous bike lane. And that's why I think a big part of why we have not been seeing traffic deaths go down since the city adopted Vision Zero. In fact, they've actually gone up, and there are more deaths happening on the street now than when the city adopted that pledge in 2015.
Proof that if you ask an NPR or KPBS reporter a question, you will get an in-depth answer.
I could
Thank
talk
you.
all night about bike
Thank
lanes,
you
trust
so
me.
much for that, Andrew. We want to again welcome you to share your questions in the Q&A box, and we'll pass them along to the reporters. So feel free to join in with your questions. Kitty, we're going to come back around to you. You had a lot of great stories around the local Ukrainian community. What has reporting on that experience meant to you? As you know, the war in Ukraine is still an ongoing story that we're covering not only nationally, but locally. Any special stories that you found powerful and maybe would like to follow up on?
Wow, it's been incredible. I mean, it just started from some really small, but every story has been so powerful. From the Ukrainian bake shop owner who started raising funds because her family was in Ukraine. She just started raising funds, and the whole it just seemed like all of San Diego went to buy her goods, and she raised so much money, and people were just donating when she ran out of things to sell, to the House of Ukraine at Balboa Park, who started taking in donations, to Tijuana, the port of entry there, where Ukrainians started coming through there to flee the war, and so many ended up staying here in San Diego, and the San Diegans just welcomed them, making accommodations for them, opening their homes, and it just opened my eyes to the hearts and the community of San Diego, just how big their hearts are. It's unbelievable. It truly made me feel like I came to the right place to work. It's incredible. But some of the stories that really moved me were of the people fleeing war. One woman, she was so worried about, she's a teacher, she was so worried about her friend who was missing, her fellow teacher. It's so tough to talk about. She was kidnapped and assaulted in front of her parents, and she doesn't know where she is. To just families who are separated. It's on and on, to a family that's here, a little boy who's getting a prosthetic leg that I look forward to telling his story. On and on the stories. And recently I covered the Ukrainian Independence Day, where Ukrainian Americans and the Ukrainian refugees stood literally in a field of the site of a future Ukrainian church and prayed and sang. And despite everything they've been through, they sang and they prayed with so much hope. And this young girl in particular, she chanted this poem with so much passion. I didn't understand a single word, but she brought everybody to tears. She brought me to tears, and it was just so powerful. I have it on my Facebook page, and you can find it if you want to listen to it. It was so powerful and so moving and so beautiful. But they stood there praying and singing and reciting poems, dressed in traditional Ukrainian clothing. And that just showed me how resilient and how hopeful and how beautiful this Ukrainian community is. And it showed me that there is hope for Ukraine, and that good things are going to happen. And it just, it inspired me to continue to tell these stories. And I look forward to continue to share them all with you. It's just gave me chills to see that site. Like I said, it was just a field with nothing on it, but at the same time, there was so much love and so much hope, and that's all you truly need.
Thank you so much, Kitty, for your coverage of that. MG, I noticed that you also are very compassionate in your coverage of many issues. One of your recent stories about some students with disabilities navigating their school campus. Could you tell us about that story? As I heard you interviewed on Midday, I think you got a little emotional talking
I
about it.
did, because once again, full disclosure, I was a special education reporter, special education teacher with San Diego Unified for 7 years before I took this job. So they are my people, and I have a special place in my heart for them. You know, and people often say to me, MG, you know, it takes a special person to do that. And I suppose it does, but when I enjoyed it so much, the story you're referring to involved a gentleman who happens to be partially blind in one of his eyes, but he is giving guidance to students who are blind. And his job is to teach them how to get around their campus, how to cross the street, how to perform daily activities to allow them to do their schoolwork. And I really enjoy telling stories. People also ask me, do you miss teaching? Honest answer, most of the time not. It was a tough job that I loved, but it was difficult. But what I love is I still feel like I'm supporting children, that I'm sharing their stories, and hopefully offering them some kind of education and opportunity in the position that I'm in now. So special children with special needs are some of our most valuable assets. And I'm just happy to still be working with them, just in a different way.
And we're so glad that you continue to do so and covering those very important, heartfelt stories from your education beat. We're going to go back to some questions from the audience. Andrew, people want to know a lot from you. What is happening with Midway Rising and city due diligence to see why the selected contractor left LA for a similar project? Do you know anything about this?
Midway Rising is a proposal put forward by three firms to redevelop the sports arena property in San Diego's Midway district. It's owned by the city. It's about 48 acres, very centrally located, and the mayor put it up basically for development, and state law requires them to prioritize affordable housing, and you know, in terms of looking at evaluating which team will ultimately get the deal. So it's actually today the City Council's Land Use and Housing Committee took up the question of which team the city should select, or which proposal, and they voted. There were 3 members out of 4, 1 was absent. They voted unanimously to support the mayor's recommendation for Midway Rising, and that question will go to the full City Council, which has the final say next week. I believe it's Tuesday. I'm not sure. I'm not familiar with, or I couldn't tell you exactly which the selected contractor that left LA for a similar project. I'm not sure what that asker is referring to there. I can tell you the 3 teams that are part of Midway Rising are Zephyr, which is a local developer based in Encinitas, Chelsea Investment Corporation, which is an affordable housing developer, and Legends, which is planning on developing the arena on the property, a new arena concert venue type of thing. And they both have, they all have, you know, various levels of experience doing that type of thing. So after the City Council votes, then that will start the due diligence phase, where both the city and the developer looking at this land, analyzing the soil, analyzing, you know, like basically everything that they have to do all of their due diligence and make sure that they can actually get this project done. And the city likewise will be doing a more thorough vetting of the proposal and making sure that, you know, once they sign this deal with this team of developers, that what they're promising can actually be achieved. So that due diligence phase could last quite a while. I would expect it to last more than a year. And then the development of the Midway or the sports arena property will probably happen over about a decade. So it'll be done in phases. But I hope that answers the question. I did as best I could.
Yes. Thank you, Andrew. We're going to welcome back Terence Shepard, KPBS's new news director, because we have some questions that were submitted before the webinar. And this came from Bruce Hartman, who wanted to know, what are your strategic priorities for the coming year and beyond, Terence?
Strategic priorities for the newsroom, focusing in on what we do best, focusing in on the stories that are unique to San Diego, that more clearly reflect the community. Also, there are questions of whether or not we're serving the entire county. San Diego County is a very diverse area. I got a website here that says there are 18 Native American tribes in the county. So the question is, how well are we serving them? Do they know we exist? How can we change that? So for me, those are strategic priorities, which fold into the mission of public media, which is to serve the entire public, not just the people who are privileged enough to hear us on radio, watch us on TV, or who have smartphones, but the entire public.
That's right. KPBS is finding new ways to engage our audiences every day. And this is a question for the entire panel. What does the future of journalism look like? And how can we engage the next generation to be informed amidst so much information clutter? So there are so many ways that everybody can get their information. What do you think the future of journalism looks like for not only KPBS, but for all media, and how we can get that next generation involved? Let's go back to Terence. Let's start with you.
It's important for media companies and KPBS to explain to audiences the importance of what we do. The three people we have here with us, the three reporters, are passionate. They're involved, yet they're able to focus on the facts, accuracy, context. So we need to do a much better job at explaining why those things are important. Why those things are important for the audiences to participate in our civic life, to strengthen our democracy, to make this a better place. So the future is going to depend on us explaining the importance of what we do.
Anybody else on the panel want to weigh in on the future of journalism and the next generation?
Well, I'd like to say that if we knew that, that would be the $1 million question. Just in the last few years, our lives have changed as we knew them. And so what I want to pass along to the younger generation is the importance of telling the truth and sticking to facts. I learned as a teacher very quickly that you can't save the world. You can't help everyone. What I can do is be an example. And so in my reporting every day, I try to show what I believe to be truth-telling, storytelling, and let people judge my work on that, and let younger folks see what that looks like. There is a lot of media out there. It makes my head hurt sometimes how much stimulation kids have these days. And so that's really, I think, the simple answer is, let me be an example of what that should look like. And then also, you got to meet the younger generation where they're at. I am a TikTok fan, and folks out there watching, if you don't know what TikTok is, you better inform yourself, because it's all about the TikTok. But it's that kind of engagement with the younger generation that I think is important. If you meet them where they're at, then you have a better chance of actually teaching them something that can benefit them, I think.
And we recently introduced a TikTok channel, so please follow us there.
Andrew, would you like to weigh in?
Yeah, I would just add that, I think that what's changing in journalism is the delivery method. So, a lot of people are reading news on their phones. If they're listening to the radio, they might be listening to a live stream on their phones as opposed to a dial on in their car or in their kitchen. TikTok is a new sort of platform that we have to convey the stories that we're telling. But I think ultimately the fundamental craft of journalism of accuracy, of checking your sources, of getting everything right, of investigations, of breaking stories, finding the stories, when everybody else is looking right, you're looking left. I think those sort of fundamentals of the craft of journalism are not changing, and I don't expect them to, because ultimately journalism is just about telling the stories and telling the truth. And that's not going to change whether you're reading a physical newspaper or scrolling through your phone.
Any thoughts, Kitty, that you would like to add about the future of journalism?
Yeah, I was going to say the exact same thing Andrew was going to say, that, I mean, journalism is journalism no matter what, and the tools may change. Who knows what it's going to look like in the future? It may be, something that pops up, virtually in front of you, but telling a story and how it's told, who, what, when, where, all the basics are going to be the same. The tools of delivery may be different, but the basics will be the same. And I think Terence is also correct that we just have to get it right, do it right, and inform, get our message out there on why it matters and why it's important. And I think if we do all those things, I think people will eventually get it.
Great. And we have another question, and we're circling back to climate change again. Jim Pugh asks for Terence specifically. I appreciate that KPBS and PBS work to make it clear that destructive climate change is reality and needs to be addressed. Does that clear position lose you a lot of financial support?
That's an interesting question. We are all about reporting facts, putting those facts in context, being accurate. As far as losing financial support, we don't do stories based on financial support. We do stories to serve the audience. And speaking of support, everyone on here is a contributor. Thank you very much for donating to us. The premise is that you're making donations because you appreciate what we do. You don't make donations so that we'll do X, Y, or Z, but you appreciate what we do. And what Kitty talked about earlier, that the daily meetings are kind of like a scrum, sort of like, let's talk about the big story. And that's a beautiful thing most days, when we all come together and say, we need this on the fires, we need this on the heat, we need this on whatever. So we do this without consideration of any donations or underwriting or whatever, but we do appreciate that, because without donations, we aren't here. So we do appreciate it, but we don't let donations for any cause affect what we do or don't do.
And circling also back to fire coverage, Jocelyn in the audience asked Kitty, fire stories are or should be every day. What approach will you prefer to take? It is not going to go away. So that's from Jocelyn. What do you think about fire coverage?
Yeah, as firefighters will tell you, fire season is year round in Southern California, in California really, and there's always a new angle, whether it's the drought, whether it's doing your due diligence, doing weed abatement. Our cities, our counties doing their due diligence, and a lot of times they're not, and they're putting their jobs off on homeowners and putting their homes at risk. You see a lot of the times insurance companies are also not insuring homes anymore. There's so many angles that are just nonstop, that all have to do with fire risk, with fire danger. You're so right, Jocelyn. It's never ending. I could think of thousands of topics that have to do with fire coverage, and we just all have to do a better job of doing more fire coverage stories. I know another big issue, especially in San Diego County, are all of the different cities have their own fire departments. And not long ago, there was a big issue in fire departments communicating with each other when there is a big fire or a big conflagration that comes together, and getting all the resources together, and hopefully when the next big one comes around, they do have it together and everything goes right, because there was a couple fires where it didn't, and it cost properties and homes. And so there is so much to cover and so much to do that we need to get our coverage right and hold people accountable before that big one happens. So thank you, Jocelyn, for that reminder, and that we need to do our part every single day and ask those tough questions. That is a really great question. Jocelyn, you should come work for us. You're wonderful.
Yeah. Yes, Jocelyn's got a lot more questions for each of you, but we're sort of getting ready to close up this hour of this Insider event. I want to welcome Terence to give any closing thoughts that he might have about this team of reporters and what we do at KPBS and why it matters so much.
Well, I think you saw for yourself 3 dedicated, genuine and authentic journalists. They share their personal stories. You do not get that from most media outlets. You've got people rushing to become superstars. The people at KPBS are solely interested in the audience, serving the audience. And that's so special. You should appreciate that. Thank you for your support. But those are my closing remarks, that the newsroom is so passionate about what we do, about getting the story right, about getting the facts, being accurate, put them in the right context. It's just, I feel like I hit the lottery by being here.
We really do have some of the best reporters around. And thank you to each and every one of you. Thank you, Kitty. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, MG and Terence, for providing this great opportunity for our KPBS members to hear from you. KPBS local reporters cover, again, a wide range of topics from health, the environment, science, as well as the arts. You can catch the important news facing San Diego on KPBS radio every day, as well as on TV, as well as online, and maybe even TikTok in the future. We have new ways of serving you every day. So, of course, our radio news program, KPBS Midday Edition, airs daily at noon with an encore broadcast at 8 o'clock each night, except for tonight. We'll be carrying BBC News coverage of the death of Queen Elizabeth. So again, coverage of a national level that we'll probably see a local angle on tomorrow. So you can also catch KPBS Evening Edition weeknights at 5 and 6:30 on KPBS TV. The San Diego News Now podcast features all the local news you trust in a very convenient podcast. All you have to do is download the KPBS app and click on San Diego News Now to get all this great reporting from these wonderful reporters. And local news is always at your fingertips at our website, which is kpbs.org. Public media stations like KPBS would not exist without support from members just like you. So thank you. We have more Directors Club and Producers Club events coming up later this year, so please look out for more information about them in your emails. And it's been so great to connect with all of you, and I hope you join us for many, many more of these member events. We cannot thank you enough. And again, thank you for supporting us. And thank you again to our reporters tonight.
Thanks. Bye,
Good
everybody.
night.
Thank you.